Good evening and welcome to the Henry Sheldon Museum's Zoom webinar presentation by Bill McKibben. I am Bill Brooks, the Executive Director of the museum. Tonight's presentation by Bill is in connection with our current exhibit, Sightlines, Picturing the Battelle and Breadloaf Wilderness Areas of Vermont's Green Mountains. The exhibit highlights the paintings of Jill Madden and the photographs of Caleb Kenna, whose art captures the wilderness areas and is a tribute to the legacy of Joseph Battelle, who donated and made possible the Green Mountains for the public. I'm sitting in the exhibit room, and behind me is a painting by Jill entitled Forest Meadow, Sucker Brook. Combining art and history, the Sheldon celebrates and explores the recreational and environmental importance of the Green Mountains. In addition to Bill McKibben, I will be joined by my colleague, Taylor Rossini, Sheldon Museum Collections Associate and grant writer. Taylor is a 2020 graduate of Middlebury College. I now introduce you to Taylor Rossini.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Just a few Zoom housekeeping tips before we get started. This is a Zoom webinar, which means that you as audience members are not on video and you're muted. So the best way for you to communicate with our wonderful speaker tonight is via the chat. We'd love it if you wanted to say hello, maybe say where you're zooming in from tonight. And if you do have any questions, please direct them to the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen rather than the chat, just so we can keep all of the questions in the same place when we get to the Q&A portion of the evening. There are closed captions on this talk, so you should see those on the bottom of your screen if you'd like to take advantage of that. And this talk will be recorded, so you'll be able to view it after the fact if you need to leave early or if you'd like to see it again. So without further ado, I will pass it back over to Bill Brooks to introduce our speaker.
I am pleased and privileged to introduce Bill McKibben, an environmentalist and best-selling author and the Schumann Distinguished Scholar at Middlebury College. In 2007, with 6 Middlebury College students, McKibben formed the organization Step It Up 2007, which organized more than 1,400 climate change demonstrations across the United States. He now leads a similar campaign on a global basis with a group titled 350.org. In 2011, he led the fight to stop the Keystone Pipeline project. Bill is the author of The End of Nature, the first book for a general audience about global warming. Bill resides with his wife, Sue Halpern, also an author and journalist, and their daughter in Ripton, Vermont, in the heart of the Green Mountain wilderness area. I recommend to you Bill's memoir, Wandering Home, a long walk across America's most hopeful landscape, Vermont's Champlain Valley and New York's Adirondacks, a beautifully written, heartfelt reflection. Here is Bill McKibben.
Well, Bill, thank you very much, and a real pleasure to join you. You're not seeing my face tonight because if Taylor can make it work, instead we're going to be seeing a series of images from Caleb and from Jill. And Taylor, is that going to work?
Yep, it sure is. Just give me 5 more seconds.
I will. Taylor has been the glue that holds all this together, it must be said. these, I wanted to talk behind these images because I think they're so striking, and they're really the reason I wanted to participate in this wonderful program with the Sheldon. There we go. And these are just going to scroll through about one every 10 seconds, and we'll loop through a few times. And so I will, I'll just be a lulling voice in the background. Good evening and greetings from Ripton. The sun has gone down on an absolutely classic October day in the woods and the fields around Breadloaf. It's not very often that the peak of foliage actually coincides with the holiday weekend, but this year it has. It won't last long. To wander up Battelle or climb Craig's Hill this afternoon was to pass through a gentle, steady drizzle of leaves drifting to the ground. So get up the mountain to Ripton in these next few hot, sunny days, or maybe even tonight. A giant solar storm is reaching our atmosphere today, and there's a chance that the aurora borealis will be flickering above Addison County. If so, the far edge of the western practice field, directly across 125 from the inn, offers some of the darkest, broadest skies in Vermont. I'll keep this talk tonight short in case anyone wants to go take a look, or more likely, in case a few of you need to keep track of Game 4 of the American League Championship Series, Division Series. Mostly, though, I'll keep it short because I have no real new information to impart. There will be plenty of good history later in this series from people like David Bain. I've heard him spiel on the remarkable Joseph Battelle, and it's worth your while. Ditto Will Amidon, who will bring an entirely new eye to this landscape. But tonight is just about pleasure. As I talk, we're going to rotate through these images from Caleb Kenna and Jill Madden. My first goal is to get you to visit the Sheldon and to see them up close. These slides are beautiful, and my thanks to Caleb for arranging them, but they are just a gloss on the actual prints and paintings. And of course, my second goal is to get you up to Breadloaf and the surrounding mountains and woods in all seasons and for many reasons. My main point tonight is the singular nature of this place. Its combination of woods and words, of sweat and eloquence, of human talent and natural exuberance is unmatched. It's a remarkable place, unlike almost any other I can think of on the face of the planet. So this will be a celebration, which for me is a relief, since most of the time when I speak, it tends more towards dirge and eulogy. But for me, this landscape provides the relief from the daily sadness of dealing with the painful decline of the planet's possibilities. I feel enormous gratitude to this place for keeping me sane, and so I will try to repay the debt just a little. The images are not keyed to my words. That would have taken more digital talent than I can muster. So just let the one wash over your eyes and the other your ears. And if you want to turn down the sound at points and just watch the pictures, I will not begrudge you. My immersion in this place is deep. Sue and I live on the edge of the Breadloaf property. If you know the route through the woods, and it's just a bushwhack, not a trail, we're the closest house to Mr. Frost's old writing cabin. We call the trek down the wagon wheel and out to the cabin and back through the woods, going around the block. And it happens more days than not. And of course, the spirit of the great New England poet hangs over this place. And though half a dozen towns across the region claim him, Ripton was his legal residence for decades, the place from which he voted. And as he ended his great poem titled New Hampshire, with these words, "At present, I am living in Vermont." The cabin, of course, is a testament to a spirit as spare and austere as some of the poems. If Frost was not, according to the memory of old Riptonites, a particularly engaging neighbor, he was also no hypocrite. There's not a hint of luxury in the surroundings he chose for himself. Perhaps because the simplicity of his domestic arrangements made the surrounding beauty stand out all the more. And not unlike Thoreau, he was a close observer. Indeed, runic scratchings on the inside of the cabin turned out to be a temperature record. And his poems provide, among many other things, an emotional calendar for the Breadloaf year. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. And of course, Frost's presence made clear the fact that at least right around the campus, we are not in true wilderness, but in a place modified over the years by man. Much of it is slowly subsiding back into its original state, but the history is easy to see and often beautiful. On a cold blue sky day, no place in Vermont is as striking as the red pine forest directly above the cabin, where the jigsaw puzzle bark of the pole straight trees glows against the snow. This stand was planted, perhaps Frost himself may have helped, and so the trees remind us of the era when they were put in the ground, of the Depression and the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the proud poverty that hung over this town and this region. There are shadows like that, echoes like that, in every corner of the landscape. But let us for the moment drown out those echoes in other noises, some of them much more recent. November approaches, and as soon as the temperature drops to 25 or 26 and promises to hold there through the night, the snow guns will begin to fire. Mike Hussey and Barney Hodges and their crew work hard to produce what is perhaps Breadloaf's most valuable crop, 5 kilometers of man-made snow that even in our increasingly unreliable winter stretch like a ribbon through the beech and the hemlock. And that snow in turn lays the ground for the sounds that will follow. The laughter of 120 kids on a Saturday morning as the Bill Koch League convenes to learn Nordic skiing. The cheering as the Middlebury High School team brings home once more the state championship in the relay. The thunder of the mass start races as the greatest collegians in the country race the trails, powering as a herd up the Sugar House climb and then drop down the steep scything descent back to the field, and the roar of the crowd, which has been stamping feet to stay warm as the races wind on. I served many years as the faculty advisor to the college Nordic team, and sometimes I would position myself at the very farthest corners of the race course, out past where any spectators ventured. And then there was something entirely elemental to the sounds. The February stillness broken by the distant huff of a skier breathing at the edge of endurance, ragged and harsh, and the slap of a ski base against the climbing track. These young men and women often make their way to the Olympics, racing in front of the world's TV cameras. But I always think back to their lone, strained faces, powering up the climbs in the empty woods, hurting for its own sake. Of course, most of the skiing that takes over these woods each winter isn't about speed and power. It's people doing the opposite of racing, slowing down, seeking solitude out in the long stretches of trail that wind up past Gilmore to Steam Mill Road and then out to Lincoln, or across the practice fields and up the Brooks Road toward the Goshen Reservoir and Blueberry Hill. The Catamount Trail from Massachusetts to Quebec encounters the Reichert trails halfway through its course. And it's fun to watch the occasional distant skier emerging from the deep woods, into the merry chaos of the touring center, stopping for a bowl of soup before plodding on, grateful for a few miles for the smooth grooming underfoot. If you know where you're going, it's only a few hundred yards off the Catamount to some true wonders. The great Beaver Dam complex in the shadow of Breadloaf Mountain, for instance, where the water drops 19 feet between the top dam and the bottom. But often, the track is its own reward, the meditative rhythm of classic skiing, as snow removes friction for a season and makes even of those of us prone to clumsiness feel a little graceful as we slide across the surface of the planet. On a lucky winter, the skiing lasts through the end of March, and we savor every day in the Vest Pocket meadows down along the south branch of the Middlebury, west of the inn, or in the higher country off Brown Gate. But often the snow is turning slushy, and always by the first week of April, the turn towards spring is decisive. First come the trout lilies in the warming mud, and then the spring beauties, and then the trillium. First come the wood frogs with their raucous quacking, even when the pools still ice over at night. And then a little later come the peepers. Eventually, the lilacs appear, alongside the Homer Noble Farm and Earthworm Manor and all the other cottages. Here's frost again. Oh, give us pleasure in the flowers today, and give us not to think so far away as the uncertain harvest. Keep us here, all simply in the springing of the year. Oh, give us pleasure in the orchard white, like nothing else by day, like ghosts by night, and make us happy in the happy bees, the swarm dilating round the perfect trees. And make us happy in the darting bird that suddenly above the bees is heard, the meteor that thrusts in with needle bill, and off a blossom in midair stands still. For this is love, and nothing else is love, the which it is reserved for God above to sanctify to what far ends he will, but which it only needs that we fulfill. Eventually, the trees themselves leaf out, though it is with that luminous pale green that seems to light up the forest. Now, I fancy that if you put me down in these woods at any point in the summer, I could guess the date within a week, just by the steady darkening of the leaves till they reach their late summer leathery maturity. But that spring leaf out comes with the black flies, about which the less said, the better. If I had to skip a month in these woods, it might be the middle of May till the middle of June. Let the mud dry and the bugs settle, but only if I have to. As summer arrives, it is with an explosion of words. For the next few weeks, Breadloaf will be as lush with verbiage as it is with foliage. These days, the nature writers arrive first for their week, alive to the natural history of the place. And then the teachers of English, intent on their advanced degrees, but also, I think, intent on getting to learn in a classroom once more instead of having to command it. These good people, who likely have spent the last semester wrangling the senior class play into some kind of shape, now get to put on dramas of their own. And it's a fortunate audience that gets to hear Hamlet or Othello out by the tennis court. And then, late in the summer, the famous Writers' Conference. Once a bit of a bacchanal, and always something of a marketplace for those who would be literati, but mostly a season of high earnestness, with writers sprawled in the Adirondack chairs that dot the lawn, manuscripts in hand, trying their best to absorb critique without defensiveness or take praise in stride. Normally, when they depart, a season of quiet descends on the old yellow buildings. But not this year. The college, in the unpredictable oddity of the dwindling pandemic, ended up with far more students than it could house. And so some 50 or 60 are domiciled now at Breadloaf. It makes some of us happy to see the buildings in use, but it is possible that a few of the charms of this place, quiet, solitude, dark, are lost on the young. There have been grumbles, and there may not be undergraduates in the rooms in years to come. For a few, though, it must be very heaven to spend the autumn in these woods and to read in the old, comfortable library, its leather chairs and leather volumes offering at least the odor of learning. Here's a Frost poem just called October. Oh, hushed October morning mild, thy leaves have ripened to the fall. Tomorrow's wind, if it be wild, should waste them all. The crows above the forest call, tomorrow they may form and go. Oh, hushed October morning mild, begin the hours of this day slow. Make the day seem to us less brief. Hearts not averse to being beguiled. Beguile us in the way you know. Release one leaf at break of day. At noon, release another leaf. One from our trees, one far away. Retard the sun with gentle mist. Enchant the land with amethyst. Slow, slow, for the grapes' sake, if they were all, whose leaves already are burnt with frost, whose clustered fruit must else be lost, for the grapes' sake, along the wall. And so we've covered the year here, October to October. And I suppose we could rightfully stop. And we probably should pretty soon because the Red Sox are scoreless in the bottom of the first. But before we end, let's wander the grounds a little, from the low points along the rushing Middlebury River, up through the fairly steady rise that forms the backdrop to main campus. As skiers soon realize, every route from the parking lot heads up into the bowl that rings the fields. It's a gentle enough rise unless you're flat out racing, and it plateaus along Steam Mill Road as it winds its way north, paralleling the spine of the greens. It's worth reflecting on the fact that this could be a very different place indeed. In the 1930s, during the Depression, as part of its relief program, the federal government offered to do for the Green Mountains what it was doing for the Blue Ridge in Virginia. Build a parkway that would bring motorists by their tens of thousands to see this scenery and in the process bolster the economy of the region. As you might expect, the boosters in Burlington and Montpelier were all for the idea. As the head of the state's Chamber of Commerce put it, the parkway is part of that program to get Vermont out of her valley-mindedness into the big view of things, which should be expected from a mountain people. So it passed the legislature with ease. But the Solons were wary enough of local reaction to ask town meetings to vote on the idea in the spring as well. And so the people weighed in, and the people rejected the plan overwhelmingly on grounds of frugality or on grounds of wanting to be left well enough alone. We didn't, as it turned out, want the big view of things. Well, the people have expressed their opinion in no uncertain terms, wrote the soreheads in the Burlington Free Press, so that's that. As Starksborough's great political scientist Frank Bryan put it, the vote was the most democratic expression of environmental consciousness in American history, mythic in its defiance and radical in its implications, a Vermont that is green and rebellious. All I know is, every time I walk or bike or ski along that road or the Brooks Road to the south, I imagine it with service stations and parking pullouts and the hum of one car after another grinding its way along this designated stretch of the scenic. And I am deeply, deeply grateful for the cussedness of our forebears. Not that I don't like the big view of things, however. So perhaps the best place to end this short tour is a stiff hike away from Breadloaf itself and up into the mountains. Caleb Kenna's drone has provided some truly wonderful perspectives on Breadloaf, and for this technology, we should be grateful. But those who know such things know that the very best view of Breadloaf is from the rock outcropping just south of Skylight Pond on the Long Trail. You have to watch for the spur, and then you have to watch your footing as you clamber out on the rocks. It's about the only place I know where my dog refuses to follow. But it's worth it. The view is sweetened by the sweat you've expended reaching it. This flank of the greens is unremittingly steep. And as a result of that steepness, it's like the view from the wing of an airplane. The valley and Lake Champlain roll out in the distance, in the middle distance, and beyond them rise the mighty swell of the Adirondacks, reminding us that the greens are a subdued and charming range by comparison with that shaggy wildness. But the better view is the foreground. You can see far south along this stair-step plateau, down at least to Silver Lake and the shoulder of Moosalamoo, the sweep of Romance Mountain. And you can see far north, up into Lincoln and the side of majestic Mount Abraham. The view along this plateau is of unbroken forest, most of it once the property of the generous Mr. Battelle. It is a wide, flat woods, its hitches and gullies mostly disguised by the canopy, at least till the leaves fall. But the exception is the fields and buildings of Breadloaf, which sit from this height in yellow and green miniature. If you've come at twilight and the lights are going on in the inn, the coziness of the distant oasis is unmistakable. It is a place of civilization amidst the gentle but real wilderness that surrounds. And now we've come to evening. The dark has descended. So once more, as we conclude from Mr. Frost and his poem, Come In. As I came to the edge of the woods, thrush music, hark. Now, if it was dusk outside, inside it was dark. Too dark in the woods for a bird by sleight of wing to better its perch for the night, though it still could sing. The last of the light of the sun that had died in the west still lived for one song more in a thrush's breast. Far in the pillared dark, thrush music went, almost like a call to come into the dark and lament. But no, I was out for stars. I would not come in. I mean, not even if asked. And I hadn't been. There I end with enormous thanks to Caleb and to Jill for their remarkable work and to the museum for putting it all together. And Taylor, I have no idea if people have questions or comments or whatever. You will know better than maybe if I look in the Q&A, I guess I'll find them.
Yep, we've got one question so far, and we'll encourage people to submit more.
I see that someone has asked, could I please specify again where that dark sky viewing area is? And absolutely. So if you pull off on the side of 125, directly across from the inn, and then start into the field there, it looks kind of flat, but it's deceptive. There's actually a kind of marked roll of the field. And if you climb all the way over, if you wander all the way over to the woods on the far edge, you're down low enough that the campus itself disappears. You can just see perhaps the spire of the inn itself. And from the far corner, the whole sky just opens up around in front of you. So it is a beautiful place. It's the field, I will say, it's a place where Missy Foote and I make a date to go skiing on the full moon every year when there's snow on the ground, because a full moon lights it completely. There's no need for a lamp or anything. There aren't many openings that size, certainly not in Ripton. And so it's a spectacular place to be and to look up at a very, very dark sky. The skies in the last week have been remarkable, and the Milky Way has been super visible. So I'm definitely heading out tonight to see if perhaps the aurora makes its appearance. And I think with that, let's see if we have any other. I don't think we have any other questions, and that's just fine. My hope was just to bear witness to it a little bit and intrigue you to go see these images. I see someone asking if I've seen any degradation since I've been a witness to this area. And the truth is no. The college has now preserved this land. It's part of Breadloaf. And the Forest Service did have plans for a few clear cuts a couple of years ago that local people turned out to oppose and to talk with the Forest Service at great length. And they modified their plans accordingly. I think we're very lucky to have a responsive arm of the federal government here in the Green Mountain National Forest. And so the woods have gotten deeper and deeper. The degradation that's come is the same degradation that's come to the forest everywhere in the Northeast. The beech trees are a sad and cankered sight. And now I'm afraid the ash trees are not long for this world, with the emerald ash borer making its appearance. But taken as a whole, and with the careful stewardship of the college, the land around Breadloaf is a remarkably beautiful place and deeper all the time. Bill, Taylor, I think we've reached the end of the evening, and I thank you enormously. This has been a great pleasure for me, and I look forward to getting down again to the museum to looking at these images while they're still up on the wall. Thank you all very much.
And Bill, we have one more question that just came in. Some have said that this year's colors are more muted due to heat and drought. What do you think?
Well, it looked like it was going to be a drab year, but I got to say, in the last 3 days, the colors have absolutely popped. It's not the single greatest year there's ever been, and there actually is a lot of evidence to the effect that changing weather patterns are shifting the timing and perhaps some of the deepness of the color. The one thing that hasn't happened yet is a cold night, and it's kind of scarily late into the autumn before we haven't even come close to a frost yet. So we hope that comes soon, and that the seasons proceed along. But I must say, the gap yesterday was magnificent at its absolute peak, and I was walking the trails of Breadloaf this afternoon, so that's down another 400 feet or something, and there, I think today was the peak there. So get up this week and take a look, because it's one of our jobs is to remind ourselves that the world is still a very beautiful place, and to bear witness to that beauty even as we're trying to protect it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Let me just.
And Taylor, thank you. Thank you very much, and go Red Sox.
Yep, and just for everyone who tuned in tonight, the exhibit Sightlines Picturing the Battelle Wilderness, featuring Caleb's photographs and Jill's paintings, is currently open at the museum. It'll be open through the end of this calendar year. So we encourage you to visit the exhibit. And we do encourage you to donate to the museum as well to make programs and exhibits like this possible. So thank you to our wonderful speaker, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful Monday night.